the earlier part of the conversations are all about startups. What type of products are we talking about here that AIB are offering? Angel funding, loans, overdrafts?
We'd look, like say you're right, this is an existing business and it's scaling, and it's what I would call, when you're looking at financing here, it's much more traditional finance. So it's around loans, it's around working capital, it's around understanding the business and where it's at in the cycle. When you're looking at a startup, it is actually a very different type of finance and a very different type of funding. And you're there and you're looking and saying, well, how do you actually start up a business? You need an investment. So it is a combination of looking at seed finance. It's a combination of actually seeing what equity can you bring in yourself, whether it's from family, friends. I mean, there was research done recently around startup companies. I think over 90% of the money actually comes from their family. That's how people actually start up. It's probably in our DNA, as I would call it, if you look at any book around the Irish society works, because you have to get to a stage of the business market where you actually can look at it from a financing and a bank point of view. But so there are, I suppose, there is a graph, as I would call it, in terms of the cycle of funding. And I think it's important about being very upfront with people as well when you're talking to them. Sorry, Seán.
The tea and coffee is ready, and we're using Lee-Strand milk outside. One more question.
First of all, I'd like to congratulate Nathan and Ballyseedy on the wonderful job they're doing out there. I really admire the work that you've been doing. But Audrey just mentioned two words that have struck a chord with me. You mentioned operation transformation, and you also mentioned, I suppose for Nathan, the model of Avoca. Now, I'm a Kildare woman. My business now is Ashmore Learning Solutions. I was, in a former life, a teacher, home economics. And I have a major issue with portion size and portion control in the food sector. And when I often visit Avoca and I see the huge portions that they present on plates, and I think, surely to goodness, if you talk about scaling down, that food portions should be scaled down and that costs could be cut in that area, and particularly in relation to weight issues and so on, that it's a major area that needs to be addressed. And I just think it's something maybe the Ballyseedy could look at. Thank you.
Point noted.
Are you saying our portions are too big?
Asked John, was he dealing with the Tesco's and the Duns of this world? My own feeling on that, I suppose just as a member of the public, if I was going to you in the morning, I think I would run for my life if you told me that.
Sorry?
I would run for my life if you were encouraging me to go to the Duns and the Tesco's. I imagine it's the last place that you'd want to go if you were trying to keep your margin.
Well, I think it's we will come across an awful lot of companies naturally that supply to the big multiples from a variety of different SME businesses. It's more that you need to understand where is their business. It does work for an awful lot of companies where they've actually got good contracts. They've got good contracts with Aldi, with Lidl. They're able to maintain their margins. It is very competitive, and it is certainly, it's a risk. We would say, for example, we look at stress testing, and you are actually dealing with the big multiples. We would actually go in and say, well, what is your margin? What is the impact if there's pressure coming in to reduce? Everyone is actually looking at their businesses. They're all actually trying to maximise profits. So we would do all of that part of our analysis. We wouldn't, like, I'm not suggesting that I'm saying to John that's where he should go, but what we need to do is actually understand, well, who are you actually going to be selling to? So the first step is who are you actually going to sell your product to? How are you actually going to get it out in the market? And then we would actually, depending on where they were actually going to distribute it, we'd actually have to understand what were the implications and the risks in that model. Because there's risks on both sides. There's advantages and disadvantages by selling to the multiples and selling to the smaller retailers. You know.
John, the other thing, John, the man asked the question, like, it isn't that we'd push anybody towards the multiples or not, but I suppose it actually leads back to dealing with the multiples, leads back to Seán's theme and Cantillon's theme in terms of intrinsic value again. So if you have something that's unique or somewhere that you've differentiated yourself from your competitors, that gives you a bit more negotiation power when you deal with the multiples. I mean, I suppose there is an element of where if you want access to the market, and if you're in the food business or wherever it is, well, that's where you get the scale. So with the scale, you need efficiencies, and and the intrinsic value gives you the ability to negotiate. And we've seen some success stories. So sometimes you may not have contracts, but it gives you access to export markets. And you know, we've one good example where it's a run-the-mill product, but the company have built a kind of a brand around the product that's given that intrinsic value. And you know, at one stage they were dealing with the multiples, and the multiple actually pulled from them. And I said, well, fine, I'm not dealing with you because you know there was an issue in terms of one of the cost of the ingredients had gone up. But they actually came back to them a few weeks later because their customers, the multiples customers, saying, well, we like that product, why is it not in the shelves anymore now? So you know, that's a good story, which I'm sure there's plenty of tough stories as well with the multiples, and they are difficult to deal with. But I think if you can build on the intrinsic value and be able to demonstrate that, I think people have had success, or what we've seen. But for us, kind of looking at it, I mean, you know, we'd say, well, if you're doing the multi, you're going to get paid, but then the issue of contract and for us to understand, well, why would they stay with you and not move to somebody else, or somebody else to come in and undercut you?